what I want you to get the picture of is good, better, best on fasting. You will find that there are different stages of where you're at. These are skill levels that start out with time restriction. Just like my goal for the next year is to get better at your YouTube comments, I am not going to set the perfect outcome tomorrow. That is setting me up for failure. The skill set that is going to take to get good at something, especially something that's valuable, is not going to be there tomorrow. So start with time restriction. That 16-8 is not bad. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to let the clock be a little bit more part of your regimen. And we call that clock-driven fasting. Finally, the best fasting out there for my diabetic who is an exercise guru. He isn't to fast based on the miles he puts on his bike or the time he puts behind his fast, because he's done a 5-day fast, a 7-day fast. He uses, he's a spiritual leader and says, I use this in my spirituality. And I'm like, okay, now I want you to do this more often in a time where you just look at your metabolism. Don't look at the clock. Graduate to a metabolism-driven fasting. It's final, the best way to say, how long should I fast, Dr. Boz? The answer is, I don't know, look at your metabolism. All right, so here we are back at this advanced level. We're gonna look at 36-hour fast. Number 10 talks about 36-hour fast without celebration meal. That is really hard for me. I've done a lot better job in the last 2 months, but I would get done with my 36-hour meal and I would expect the family to party with me, like, oh my goodness, let's have something really nummy. And I don't need to do that. But that was a real deal, like conquering that ability to say, it's just a fast. You can mentally get over whatever it is that food is saying to you in the quietness of this. But we'll go on to 48 and 72 in just a minute. All right, so again, this is metabolism driven. Everybody should be checking numbers in this one. I want to show you, these are healthy, lean people, and I want you to think about what has happened over the course of maybe your checking. I'll give you a little insight into mine, and again, that's why I pointed out the Instagram. I would love for you to scroll back over the last 2 years, looking at my different fasts and noticing that my morning sugars have not always been as great as they've been in the last few months. When you look at glucose on that, the axis, the vertical axis, and along the horizontal axis, you have the time. Now, I didn't put time in here at the beginning because I want you to focus on the numbers. So here their glucose was 80, 70, 67, 65, and 55. And I can't help, I need to repoint out that says healthy, lean patients. This is not folks that are overweight or have had a trouble with insulin. They had healthy, lean patients. Their glucose, when their insulin, or when their when their glucose got to 80, we can be really confident that these healthy patients were lowering their insulin. As they got into the 70s, their glucagon was coming to be part of the process. They started to get actually better energy. Their brain starts to work a little better, and that's majorly linked to that epinephrine, that kind of fasting euphoria that you think is weird until it's you going, I can't believe how good I feel. We talk a lot about growth hormone in the book that I wrote, saying if you want to raise growth hormone without getting a big bossed frontal protuberance, or increasing the breast size in males and females, but specifically males overgrowing their mammary glands, having some decline in your sex organs, growth hormone, when we replace it as physicians, is not nearly as precise as when your own brain and organs talk together to get the right levels. I have a whole chapter about that in my last book. I love that chapter, actually. As you get into that higher stress level, you can see cortisol rise. And then, now this next one, be a little nervous. These are healthy, lean people that hadn't practiced fasting. When they get that blood sugar down to 55, they can get a little dizzy or a little lightheaded. Because this was a rapid slam, 72 hours is how long that took. I actually come back and put that in a minute. If you look at some of the other charts that I've used to teach, I go through, again, a whole chapter in my book about this, but I think it's helpful to notice. When we took standard American diet, and we have these fasting, healthy, lean people. These numbers at the bottom right now are the first 28 hours, so just over 2 days. We know that in the healthy people, At about the 8-hour to 12-hour mark is when their system allows the glycogen, the stored sugar, to be part of their energy source. And it is. It's quick glucose. They unwrap that glucose and out it goes to the system where it's needed. Some of the other processes that happen in phase 4 and 5 were studied when those fasting, healthy people were fasting for 40 days. This is a whole different process that I contend many of my insulin-resistant patients, the folks who've been overweight for the better part of 3 decades, they never hit this part. The gluconeogenesis doesn't play yet. They're still stuck in the glycogen phase. So let me show you that in a different way. This is the journal in 2000 that went through some of the what really happens when we fast. So they looked very closely. Again, this is healthy people. 72-hour fast. These are not insulin resistant. They measured glucose on the vertical axis and the hours fasted along the horizontal axis. I'm going to show you 4 different hormones that they looked at. So just looking at glucose, and these are again the metrics for America, they started out with the healthy people had glucose between 100 and 80. They then, at 24 hours fasting, dropped their sugar between 69 and 61. When a healthy body has emptied the glycogen, their sugars are in the 60s. And people, this blows people's minds. Like, I fasted for 48 hours. How could my sugar be so high? I'm like, you still have a whole bunch of storage. And they say, well, what am I supposed to do? Fast for a week? I'm like, no, you need to chip away and you need to fast to your metabolism. Start looking at when you can see that metabolism sink. And that alone gets you, I'll tell you, when I first hit this barrier in my own journey, it was 72 hours before I could get my sugars into the 60s. And if you go back, it'll be 18 months ago now, I had these 72-hour fasts. And I think I was posting at that time. I think that's when I started posting. But watch them. Here's the interesting part though. These, again, they measured insulin in these healthy, lean patients. Now, you've heard me talk a lot about insulin and how it is not the best thing for us to measure. Even in this super fancy test, well-funded test, insulin is so volatile that it changes many times in a few minutes. And the insulin didn't change much over the 72-hour fast for these healthy people. This doesn't correlate to the people who are insulin resistant. And they'll open up these studies and say, but doc, they fasted for 72 hours, I should be fine. I'm like, wait. Their body doesn't have a whole bunch of stored sugar. Their body hasn't seen an extra amounts of insulin for the last however long, right? So in the event that you look at insulin, you can see it barely changed. It barely changed. And this is why when you come to my clinic, when people say, can you check my insulin? I tell them, I don't like to do that. I'm going to spend your $100 or whatever it takes in your area to get insulin checked. I'm going to fight with your insurance to cover it, and I'm not going to be able to trust it most of the time. If you have the hiccups, it will change your insulin. If you have a large bowel movement, it changes the insulin. It does not change the glucose and the ketones as fast though. And that's why the glucose ketone index is measured so much in our patients with cancer and seizures. And it's why the Dr. Boz ratio is something I continue to come back to, saying, don't come to my office for this. You have it in your home. You do have to invest about $100 to get a kit and in that little kit you can use a promo code so about $100 gets you 50 glucose, 50 ketones. You are going to learn so much about your metabolism. Quit fasting blinded if you're in this advanced stage. So when you look at what happened to these folks these are healthy. They start out, of course, their standard American diet, so they had no ketones at the beginning. At 24 hours, it's up to 2. At 48 hours, they're up to 4.3. And again, these are new ketoners, so these numbers are kind of, you can get a little jealous of these numbers when they first do this, but they haven't produced a ketone in a while. So they shoot up almost to a 5 of a ketone level as an average for 72 hours. Again, these are healthy, lean patients. Last but not least, I like to point out this, is that they did study norepinephrine. So norepinephrine this is the energy cycle that happens when you fast. Their average baseline was somewhere around 2,000. They get out to that 24-hour mark and it's up a little higher. They get up to the 48-hour mark and they're up to over 3,000 average. And then at 72 hours, they're almost at 4,000. Again, really seeing a nice spike in their energy. And if you're fasting, you will contend. This is real. You can feel it. So again, glucose during the fast. Remember how I said this? I wasn't going to put the time up. This is the difference between healthy patients and my patients with insulin resistance. They got their sugars down in 72 hours. 3 days of fasting, and they had a rapid decrease in their glucose. But if you're insulin resistant, if that's you, these patients, it was closer to weeks before they got their glucose down into the, and by week I mean that 10, 11, 12 days before a person with insulin resistance could really see those glucoses come down into the 60s and stay. And it is because of what has happened over the last 10, 15 years of higher insulin, and that sugar is just naturally been at an increased rate. So I show you this to say, if you are studying your fasts and looking at your metabolism while you fast, you will not fall into that zone of, doc, this keto diet just doesn't work for me. I haven't lost a pound in 6 months and I am totally keto. Yeah, I know, but you aren't looking at your own health. You're looking at some studies, and they're probably done of people who were healthy. So going back to that phase where at 14 days, that 2 to 20 weeks is when my insulin-resistant patients really are able to say, can they get rid of that glucose or glycogen? Now, they fasted for that long, guys. I don't want you to do this. You do not need to fast for 2 weeks if you're insulin-resistant. But what you do need to do is fast long enough that you get a Dr. Boz ratio that says, yes, we lowered our insulin. Which brings me back full circle. When we look at the gal who lost 100 pounds and she still says, I want to lose, I don't remember if it's 20 or 30 or 40 more pounds. But she's like, okay, and I'm fasting 48 hours. Am I doing a good thing? And I'm like, I don't know. You got to look inside. If you get your Dr. Boz ratio to 40 or less, I know that your insulin has decreased. And that's how we'll know that she's continuing to heal at a cellular level. If she does not get those glucose to decrease and those ketones to rise, she's probably suffering right up to the edge of that change. And that's where I feel like that's an injustice. Anybody who's fasted for 48 hours should be saying, okay, if you make it 3 more hours, your system is going to turn. Or in her case, what we told her was, if you only want to fast for 48 hours and you want to hit the good numbers, you're going to need to use your muscles. Now, I don't ever talk about this. I don't say you need to be exercising on the ketogenic diet, because if you want to lose weight, that happens in the kitchen. If you want to build muscle, that happens in the gym. This is the crux of my patients with chronic inflammation. They go to the gym. They peter out and end up not going after 6 weeks because the returns on their investment show nothing. When I get them to decrease their carbs and follow their ketones, oh my goodness, they lose weight, they feel better. And then as they progress along that keto continuum, we get to the next step, which says, hey, if you want to completely graduate, we'll take you to a 36-hour fast. We'll take you to a 48-hour fast, and we'll take you to a 72-hour fast. And you'll be okay. But most importantly, we shouldn't be measuring your fast with a clock. Each of you are different. The diabetic whose sugars are high, who bikes, he keeps track of how many miles he bikes a week, and I'm like, that's a lot. Why aren't your sugars better? And it is because he's biking to a metric, and he's fasting in these stretches that are really long and hard instead of a steady decline until his metabolism hits that level of a Dr. Boz ratio of 40 or less is what I would tell him to do. The same thing with the gal who's lost the first 100 pounds and says, I don't want to fast longer than 48 hours. I'm like, okay, then I need you doing some wall sits or some planks or some isometric muscle strengthening during your fast. And it's not a lot, it's just enough to raise the metabolism during the fast. And what I'd really tell her to do is to probably do those wall sits a couple times a week when she's not fasting. The other part that I want to make sure I bring back full circle is, okay, I've had some things in my ketogenic journey that tastes terrible, but this doesn't. If you've had some things that you have during your fast, when they are in the first phase of their fast, that one where it's with ketones, I let them have cream in their coffee. I let them have bone broth. I let them do practically anything that's better than what they were doing. But as you move to the advanced levels of this, I start to get very strict about what I let them have. Number one, they can have black coffee. Number two, if it's late, you can have tea. Now, the purpose of the tea is it's got a little flavor, but it also has high levels of antioxidants. It gives a little bit of just palate pleasure, as long as the tea doesn't taste moldy. And there is no better way to guarantee that than the process that this company uses in how they make their tea. So the other things I let folks have are, bubble water without any kind of essence or minerals in them. Please leave a review on Amazon if you've bought any of our products. It really supports this channel. Thank you very much. Also, if you haven't read my favorite teaching tool, it's the book that I wrote, Any Way You Can, which I think the next one just shows yes in Spanish and in Chinese.
Please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. Stay tuned.